Welcome to the Sidecar Sync podcast, your home for all things innovation, artificial intelligence, and associations. Greetings and welcome to the Sidecar Sync, your home for content at the intersection of artificial intelligence and the world of associations. My name is Amith Nagarajan.
And my name is Mallory Mejias.
And we are your hosts. And as always, we have prepared for you, for your listening pleasure, all sorts of craziness that have to do with the world of AI, because things don't seem to ever slow down, do they, Mallory?
They never do. But you know what else never slows down? Time in general. And Amith, we're about a month out from DigitalNow 2025. How are you feeling about that?
I'm pumped. We're ahead of target in terms of registrations, and we're looking forward to not only the biggest DigitalNow ever up in Chicago, November 2nd through 5th. We'll keep hammering that home, November 2nd through 5th. You do not want to miss that. And we will have a record crowd, and we'll have probably over 300 people is the target. And we expect to have incredible content. We've got amazing keynotes lined up, amazing sessions lined up, and for the very first time, we have an awards program. So we'll be recognizing innovators in the community for the outstanding work they've done to contribute to the advancement of their individual association and to the broader association community by sharing their learnings and sharing their good work. So really excited about that. The community is, I think, really firing on all cylinders. We just had that amazing Sidecar MVP Summit, which is up in Utah for a day and a half back in late September. And this is perfectly timed for the broader Sidecar community to come together. So really excited about that. We've got amazing growth in the AAIP certification program. All of it's come together. So I am really pumped.
I'm pumped as well. I will be there. So everybody listening, if you're attending DigitalNow 2025, come up to Amith and me and tell us hi and all the things you know about our lives from this podcast. It's always a pleasant surprise hearing stuff like that. But Amith, working on Ascend 3rd edition, which will also be officially released at DigitalNow 2025, I've come to really just admire and appreciate the innovative work that the association community is doing. And so I think it's awesome that we have a dedicated awards program to recognize those innovators.
For sure. Yeah, there's so many things that are happening in the world of associations right now. And we want to recognize not just the sizzle, and the sizzle is always exciting. People want to pay attention to the sizzle, the headlines, the things that really catch your attention. And we've got plenty of that. But I would say that some of the really basic day-to-day things people are doing to improve their efficiency by 5%, by 10%, by 20% are really where a lot of the unsung heroes are playing right now, where we have a lot of people who've mastered the basics of AI. They've taken their time, they've gone through, they've put in the reps, right? And they've learned a lot, and they're automating things, they're semi-automating things, and they're saving themselves time, they're saving their team members time. And that in turn is translating to two things. Number one, of course, better throughput, better member responsiveness, but it also is seeding the idea machine, which is this flywheel of creativity that only can come from your own direct experience working with these tools. And we always talk about, how do you start with AI? Well, you just start. You have to get going. You put one foot in front of the other, so to speak, and you move down that path. And so we're starting to see people who are, in fact, doing that for in some cases now for a couple of years. And that's resulting in people saying, wait a second, I did this really basic thing with Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini. I bet I could do this other thing. And that leads to, oh, wait a second, but we could also do this. So creativity, I think, is very much this thing where you have to have some momentum and you keep building that, that over time. And so I find it actually really important to recognize people where they're at and to look for people who are doing really interesting day-to-day things in their own workflow or at the team level. Certainly large-scale enterprise, transformational things where people are deploying, AI at scale. Of course, we want to talk about that. I think it's really important to recognize people. And leaders, those of you that are listening in to the Sidecar Sync, I'd recommend that you give people props. When you're talking about big things happening in AI, don't just focus on the big, moonshot goals. Those are very important, but also think about the people who are making that incremental progress and starting to add mass to your flywheel and spinning it just a little bit faster each day.
Mm-hmm. John Spence has a great phrase. He was a keynote speaker at last year's DigitalNow, and he's also been on the podcast before, but of catching people doing things right. And I love that, right? Because we're so often, I catch someone doing something wrong, but catch someone doing something right today. how they're using AI, something innovative they're doing with their daily work, it makes an impact for sure. Amith, I've got to ask because we're a month out. Do you have any idea what you're talking about in your keynote session?
I have a general idea. 30
Okay.
days is an eternity in the world of AI and in kind of my crazy brain. So I think that I'll settle on the topics in the next couple weeks,
Mhm.
just narrowing it down. I like to open the conference with kind of a macro view. I don't like to talk about one specific or two specific topics too much. You'll definitely hear me talking about agentic AI, but I want to get past the hype and really get down to the meat of it and talk about how people can do things and how people are doing things with agentic AI. We'll have a lot of sessions on agentic AI, by the way. But ultimately, I think that I'll be trying to frame the conversation around like the journey that we've been on, and the journey that where we're at in the journey at the moment, and where we're heading. And so that's what I tend to talk about each year at Digital Now, with some sub themes that are zoomed into what's happening at the moment. Last year, for example, we talked about voice. And at the time, audio models were just starting to become good enough for close to real time interaction. ChatGPT, advanced voice mode, or what they called the real time API, had made its debut maybe 2 months before Digital Now last year. Since then, so much has happened in the world of audio. And we've talked a lot about audio, which is appropriate for a podcast, of course. We like audio a lot. But it's definitely going to be featured. And I think the intersection of audio and agentic AI is super interesting. So getting to your members and to anyone else for that matter when they're on the move or they just prefer to speak. A lot of us aren't the best at typing. And so even if you're pretty good at typing, you can probably speak quite a bit faster, but also there's more richness to what you're saying. We've talked about the information density of different modalities at times, where we talk about video having very high information, audio having a little bit less information, right? And then text having the least information compared to the three. And so when you just type something in, the AI can only infer from that literally the characters that you typed. If you and I type the exact same thing, the
Mhm.
AI just gets that. Whereas nowadays, the audio models aren't simply doing, speech to text, then text to speech. They're actual native audio models, and they're able to actually hear emotion and tone and speed and all of these things. So it's pretty amazing stuff. So audio, agents, and the macro view. Those will be kind of the high level topics, but that is subject to change. So you're just going to have to come to Digital Now for those of you that are listening and figure out. I know I've talked to a couple of our keynotes that are planning cool things for the event, and they're doing the same thing. They're kind of narrowing down just generally what they're going to focus on, but so much happens every day in the world of AI that it's a little bit hard to be 100% specific.
Well, we are looking forward to it. Amith, I want to introduce today's topics. We're covering three big OpenAI announcements. So, first, we're going to talk about DevDay 2025, where ChatGPT is transformed into a platform that potentially lets anyone build apps without code. Then we'll be talking about ChatGPT Pulse, the $200 per month AI assistant that researches for you while you sleep. And finally, OpenAI's $1 trillion infrastructure deals with AMD, Nvidia, and Oracle that reveal where AI is really headed. So let's jump into DevDay 2025. One of the major announcements really is that ChatGPT is now a platform where you can build and run entire applications directly inside the chat interface. They demonstrated this with live examples of data visualization tools and interactive games running entirely within chat conversations. AgentKit, relevant for what we just discussed, Amith, is their new toolkit that eliminates coding entirely. It's not a low code solution, it's no code. So users can describe what they want in natural language, and AgentKit builds functioning AI workflows. During demos, someone built a complete customer service automation system using only voice commands. The system could intake requests, route them, generate responses, and escalate to humans when needed, all created by speaking to the AI for under 5 minutes. Now, I'll let you all know I tested out the agent builder myself. I didn't find it so intuitive. I have some experience with platforms like N8N and Zapier. I find those much more functional and user friendly at this moment. And you're also not locked into the OpenAI ecosystem when you use those tools. Just a note from me. They unveiled GPT-5 Pro in the API with aggressive pricing to undercut Anthropic and Google. Sora 2, the AI video model that we covered recently, is now available via API with synchronized audio generation. The new Codex upgrades include direct Slack and GitHub integration, so now AI can read your team's conversations, understand context, and push code directly to repositories. They also launched Image One Mini, a smaller but highly capable image generation model at 80% less cost than flagship models. They're also testing a model selector that lets users choose between different image models based on budget and quality needs. Plus, we're seeing new voice APIs that are 60% cheaper than before. The real wake up call came from CEO of OpenAI Sam Altman when he said individual creators can now build what previously required entire companies. A lot to unpack there, Amith. What is the most exciting takeaway for you?
Well, I'll start with what you wrapped on, which is Altman's quote. And I do think he's right that an individual has unbelievable power and potential to create now. And that is true across a lot of different platforms. You pointed this out earlier. It's not just OpenAI. They're clearly the leader right now in terms of consumer mindshare. They have over 1 billion monthly active users on ChatGPT. That I think is greater than all the other competitors combined. So they're clearly the leader in terms of consumer adoption. And so they have an opportunity, and there's also some responsibility to pave the way in terms of what the next thing should be for the platform. I think ChatGPT, along with Claude and along with all the other major players in conversational AI, of course, want to be the platform because when you're the platform, the universe kind of revolves around you. And when you're a participant in someone else's platform, you don't have that level of control, and clearly the profit follows the control. So there is an opportunity here of significant proportions, and that is what everyone's chasing. I think your earlier point actually is worth really hammering home for our listeners is that when you go to a full stack solution like OpenAI's Agent Builder, or if you were to go to the same thing from a number of other companies, you are fully integrated, which means it's kind of like the Microsoft days of old. You are 100% bought into that layering of technology. You use OpenAI models, you inference or run the model on their cloud infrastructure with their security environment, whatever that is, whatever you sign up for. The next layer up, in terms of APIs and then the agent builder, you're in their environment. And then presumably from there, you would either use their UI directly through ChatGPT or you could build apps on top of that. They did also have some tooling around conversational UI that you can embed in your own app, which is quite convenient. So let's talk about the pros and cons of this. The pros are it's easy. So you have this fully integrated working stack where if you want to build a solution and if you're comfortable being 100% based on OpenAI, it's not quite turnkey as you encountered when you're trying to use Agent Builder, but it is much more integrated than anything else you're going to see out there, at least at the moment, to my knowledge. However, the downside is what you pointed out. You are fully at Sam Altman's, beck and call, essentially. You belong to him. And obviously, based on the way I said that, I'm not particularly comfortable with that. And it's not about Sam, it's about anybody. I like the idea of optionality. I like the idea of choice. And it's not because I don't like OpenAI. I'm actually a big fan of theirs. I think they've done amazing work. I've got concerns about some aspects of the company, but the same could be true for a lot of other businesses. So this is not anti-OpenAI at all, to be clear. This is more about optionality. The world of AI is changing so incredibly fast that I think having the ability to switch models, to switch model providers, to use other inference providers like Grok with a Q or Cerebrus or a number of other providers that have faster chips, being able to move to model providers, perhaps like Google, who have innovative architectures, is really important. And so if you are on a singular provider, you're limiting your choice. Now, that may be a trade-off that's reasonable to you, and that's fine. You just have to, in my mind, the goal is to be aware of that. So if that trade-off is okay to you, by all means, go forward and build on the OpenAI stack. Just know that you are completely in that environment, probably for a while, because models are easy to swap in and out, right? You can very easily change models. If you build your software even reasonably well, there's lots of ways to very quickly swap models in and out, inference providers in and out. But once you go to a higher level of abstraction, a more complex layering, and you put your business logic into something like Agent Builder, now you're really going to have a hard time porting that over to another platform. To move from their Agent Builder to Zapier to Google's Agent Builder or to anything else, that takes effort. It takes time. So I do think that there's trade-offs. I think that prototyping in an integrated stack like that could make sense because it's quick and easy. But I also think you have to be thoughtful about, is that the architectural decision you want forever? To me, security is paramount. And so I am really concerned about any of the major labs, OpenAI and Claude as well. But it's the ability for them to have your full stack of compute in their cloud. And this frequency with which these major players are changing their terms and conditions about privacy is concerning. Now, I'll make a comment about Anthropic, who normally is actually, these guys are normally very privacy forward and very focused on alignment and safety. But very surprisingly to the community, about 3 weeks ago, they announced that they were just going to start training future models based on prior data that you share, which shocked a lot of people. Like, wait, hold on a second. That was the opposite of the default setting before. And so when that happened, of course, you can address that, but it's really problematic when these companies, which are already very large companies, they're already extremely powerful, and they already have, and power isn't so much because of their revenue. And they have decent revenues now, and they're growing fast. But it's more about where they live in the stack and how dependent you are on them. The power of the vendor is determined much more by that than by anything else. So my point about all this is that because of the fluidity with which these vendors seem to think they can just change their terms and conditions, and they have the power to do so, I would prefer to have optionality. I would prefer to be an association that says, listen, I can put a protective bubble around my content. I can absolutely leverage AI, but do it in a safe way where I have optionality. And if a vendor decides to make those kinds of changes, I'm not subject to their whims because it would take me 6 months to port my agent architecture over to something else. So that's my thought process. I don't think that it's a bad idea to use an integrated stack. I just think you have to go in with your eyes extremely, pried open with a crowbar,
Hmm.
because if you ignore this, you're going to regret it later on that you didn't think through it.
So your recommendation would be to employ agents in your own private cloud infrastructure?
Maybe. I mean,
Okay.
I think it depends. If you're a small association with limited IT resources and you look at it and say, the risks to us are pretty minimal, and we don't have the resources to do anything outside of leveraging a single stack, then OpenAI, or, I guarantee you Claude is going to have a similar architecture very soon. Gemini already does, right, in the Google ecosystem. So picking an integrated stack is okay. If you're a little bit larger, more sophisticated technology or organization, and you say, "Listen, I'm not sure that that makes sense to us. We have a wide array of disparate data sources. We're really concerned about our proprietary data, both structured and unstructured." You might want to think about it. You might want to put some reps into selecting the right architecture for you. And certainly, if you're a larger association, you really need to. Associations sometimes spend months or even quarters, sometimes over a year, selecting pieces of infrastructure like an AMS or an LMS. I'm not suggesting that associations adopt that cycle or that timing for selecting an agent architecture, but I do think they should spend a little bit of time diligencing. And it's not just diligencing the vendor or the technology capability, but it's what I'm talking about and what you mentioned earlier. It's how much lock-in do you have? How much control are you just ceding to the vendor? Again, they're not bad or good. It's just they're different approaches. It's like
Mhm.
everything else in life. There's pros and cons to it. I just wanted to highlight it because when the market leader has an announcement like this, there will be a lot of people who somewhat blindly just rush off into that future without thinking through the consequences. And of course, part of our job on the Sidecar Sync is to help people navigate that journey. But I would recommend taking a little bit of time on this. We at Sidecar are going to be producing an agent selection toolkit, which is basically the idea of a downloadable set of resources that'll help you think through this exact decision making process. And that's going to be coming in the next couple of weeks. So I'm excited about that. I think that's going to help the community quite a bit. It's just basically a set of decisions that you have to think through and really gather some data in an objective way first. And this is also, by the way, not something you just say, "Hey, IT person that you have, go figure this out." They probably are going to be overwhelmed by it. But even if they're not overwhelmed by it, this is a business decision. This is not a technology decision. It's more about what is the surface area of your competitive opportunity and what are you comfortable with in terms of the data privacy side.
I would also add to that, Amith, that even if you don't want to be locked in to OpenAI through the agent builder for whatever pros and cons that you just talked about, it's still a really good idea, especially if you're non technical, to just play around with it, to kind of understand the logic, how things connect, start asking questions of, like, how is data flowing from one piece to the next? Because I've been dabbling with that more recently, and I can see my skills growing where I'm like, okay, I understand how these workflows work, what inputs and outputs I need to get the result that I'm looking for. So I would encourage you all to check it out, even if you have no plans to deploy an agent.
Totally agree. I think that the experimentation you're describing is super important. I think the thing you just need to do is set expectations ahead of time that, the tool that you use to experiment isn't necessarily the tool that you'll go live with in production, or maybe do use it for a bit, but you have plans to migrate to something more enterprise grade at some stage. The other thing I'd point out is the agent builder from OpenAI is it's kind of like some of the other agent builder tools that are out there. It's got a slick looking UI, which makes it look like it's just a pretty picture, and it's got a flowchart on it, and anyone can do it, and that's true. But if you kind of click one level down, you'll see that it's not necessarily code in the traditional sense, but it's a bunch of fairly complex configuration settings that you have to put into each of these nodes. Now, you can ask the AI to help you set it up, which is helpful. Um, but at the same time, just remember, this is still not a super polished technology. That's true for all of the agent builder tools. There's lots of agent tools. There's architectural software out there like LangChain LangGraph. There's software like AutoGen. There's obviously the Member Junction agent platform that we've built and open sourced for this community. All of these tools are still early. So you got to remember they have some rough edges. And so just remember that. Like don't think of this as like going into Microsoft Excel or Word or something like that that's been around for 20 plus years and is perfectly polished for you. Again, I am 100% in agreement with Mallory that you should go out there and test this stuff out and play with it. But just be aware that there's some things you're going to have to kind of tolerate as you're moving at the speed of AI.
Hmm. I saw a post too that I think you liked on LinkedIn, Amith, from Christopher Penn, who was one of our keynote speakers from DigitalNow 2023, I believe. And he was saying the same thing. So that made me feel a little bit better. Like, yes, it's a no code platform, but you still got to know like schemas and all the things I don't even know how to talk about. So, anyway, moving to ChatGPT Pulse, which I feel like I kind of missed in the news with DevDay and all the other things that were going on. Sam
Yeah,
Altman,
you had your
CEO of
finger off the pulse slightly there.
they're clever. Sam Altman is calling ChatGPT Pulse his favorite feature they've launched in a long time. It was launched September 25th of this year, 2025, for pro users at $200 per month on mobile. So while you sleep, ChatGPT researches topics relevant to you based on past conversations, saved memories, and connected apps. Then it delivers 5 to 10 personalized briefing cards to you when you wake up. From actual demos, we saw users get soccer match analysis, Halloween costume suggestions, and toddler-friendly travel itineraries. If you connect Gmail and Calendar, which is optional, Pulse drafts meeting agendas, recommends restaurants for your trips, and surfaces task reminders. Users can curate what they want researched, and after your morning brief, it says, that's it for today, so you have no endless scrolling like you might on social media. OpenAI is framing this as democratizing personal assistance at $200 a month. Yeah, maybe we can question that. Why should you as associations care? Well, to me, this sounds a lot like an email newsletter, first of all, and members will expect this proactive, personalized service from you too when they're waking up to AI curated industry insights and conference prep tailored to their interests. So, Amith, like I said, I was off the pulse with ChatGPT Pulse. Do you think associations should be racing to transform their newsletters into something like this?
Well, first of all, I should say that any joke I attempt to make has to pass the will it make my teenagers gag test. I think I did it. I nailed it there.
Oh,
Um,
will it? Yeah, I was like, I don't
yeah,
think they would laugh at that one, Amith, but I
no,
did.
exactly. Which makes it funny to me. So,
Dad joke qualifier.
yes, exactly. So, right on the bullseye for that. So, my thought process is this is a great feature. This is a great addition to the ability for people to consume content that's relevant to them. As far as associations are concerned, you guys are at the center of the universe for your particular field. You have, in many cases, the most respected brand as a content authority and community in your field. And you've been publishing content, most of which you probably have behind a paywall or behind some kind of member access only type of, limiter. So it's not in the public domain is the point. And yes, you should be doing this too. You should absolutely be doing this. We've had this now 10-year long running experiment going called rasa.io. The website is just that. It's rasa.io, and it's one of our companies at Blue Cypress. And The Sidecar newsletter, for the tens of thousands of you that receive it multiple times per week, it is powered by Rasa.io, as are newsletters from hundreds of other associations, and many companies use Rasa as well. The thesis behind Rasa was very simple. So over 10 years ago when we started the project, we said, could we do a better job than the generic one size fits all way of communicating? Could we personalize content at scale using artificial intelligence to really understand people and serve them better? Ultimately, the goal for Rasa is, as we stated in our core purpose statement, to better inform the world. So algorithmically, that particular product has always been about how do you get people informed and then get them on their way. Right? So rather than sucking them into one of these spiral loop type things, which is problematic for lots of reasons, you inform them and you move them along. And that's what we've done for over 10 years now with that company. I think there's lots of ways to do this. By the way, this isn't a pitch for Rasa. It's more of the pitch for the idea that personalization is the critical sauce that people expect from you everywhere. So the email newsletter was the first thing that we focused on because it was the easiest thing to do. Also, it was super high impact. It's kind of this, like, going back to the unsung heroes kind of theme from earlier in the pod. It's something people basically have no respect for, right? The email newsletter is this thing that everyone does, or most people do, but no one really thinks of it as important. No one thinks of it as like this strategic asset, yet it probably has the most frequency of touch with your audience out of anything you do. Your email is in their inbox, in some cases daily, some cases more than daily. And a lot of times you hear from your members, oh, you send me too many emails. Well, that actually only happens when you send them emails they do not want. When you send them emails that are really helpful, they ask for more of them, if you would believe that. We have lots of customers who say, hey, can you increase the frequency of that email for me? So the point I would make is, going back to what you said, Mallory, when you have a major company like this that has 1 billion plus monthly active users, that's offering at the moment for $200 a month, but soon will probably be free, this kind of service, you better pay attention to this if you're an association that's in the business of providing information in your industry, because if you can get it more easily through ChatGPT, you will. And so what will the association have to do? You'll have to lower your barriers, make friction less, increase the quality. And you have a fighting shot here, because you have content that no one else has, and you have a brand that's the envy of all in your field. And so if you then apply just a little bit of advanced technology to this and personalize your content and deliver it in an engaging way, you can solve the problem. You can get incredible engagement. And we have empirical results, again, over a decade for hundreds of associations seeing exactly that. The nice thing, too, is the cost and the complexity of doing exactly what you described earlier, Mallory, has kept dropping. Year after year after year, it's easier and cheaper to do it. So lots of options in terms of how to go about doing it. But I would highly encourage people to put this very high on their list of things to do. And the newsletter, by the way, is just one surface area. It should also apply to all of your other emails, right? So if I'm going to send Mallory an email that says, hey, Mallory, you need to come to Digital Now, should I send Mallory a generic email that I send to 10,000 other people? Or should I send her an email that points out the sessions at Digital Now and the speakers at Digital Now that she might be most interested in, right? Should I create a subject line just for Mallory that's perhaps in the style that she's most likely to engage with? Perhaps it's humorous, or perhaps it's very factual based on what we know about Mallory. Sure, it'd be great to write an email to Mallory that is totally tailored for her, as the content just for her. And that's just one more example. It's an email marketing thing for a conference. What about your educational opportunities? How about your volunteer opportunities? All these things are problems of constraints, meaning you want to be able to deliver a high quality of service. You want people to all feel that they're at a luxury spa being checked in for some highly anticipated, enjoyable service, but they really kind of feel like they're going through the McDonald's drive-in most of the time. So that's the reality of it. The good news is the technology's here. I mean, you see it in front of your face. You can use this stuff in your association to solve this problem too.
As I was thinking of my personalized Digital Now email, Amith, I was thinking of, what's on the snack bar, what meals are we serving? I like to really get a full picture,
Totally. Yeah, I mean, people come for the content at least some of the time, and they stay for the food, I guess. But or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe they come for the food and then they just absorb some of the content along the way.
A little bit of both.
Food's gonna be pretty good.
Everybody likes a little sweet
I always tell the
treat.
the conference organizers for Digital Now and just other stuff I'm involved in, to say, listen, people do want some healthy options, have an apple or two, but they always want some junk food. They want those cookies in the middle of the afternoon. May not be the best thing for them, but conferences are kind of fun. They're a little bit it's like a mini vacation of sorts. It's also a great place to upload new content into your brain.
I remember you telling me exactly that. And I was like, ooh, score. So we did like a donut bar and some cookies and brownies, and people loved it. But Amit, I wanted to ask obviously, we're familiar with Rasa.io because it's in the Blue Cypress family. As you mentioned, that seems like an easier entry point into personalization. But it also seems like a more narrow solution in that it only is focusing on the newsletter, even though it has high impact. So for associations that are thinking bigger with personalization, what do they need to be thinking about right now? Like, aside from newsletter, you've got to get this in order if
Sure.
you want to take personalization to the next step.
I mean, I just start with the first step, right? Which is like pick the easiest possible thing you can
Hmm.
personalize. And it probably will be your newsletter. It could be something else. Personalizing your website tends to be a lot more complex because there's just lots of moving parts to that. And there's a lot of technology. And there's usually at least one or two vendors involved. So that tends to be a little bit harder to do. Just as a quick note, Rasa actually now has a product. They've had it for about 6 months called Campaigns, which actually personalizes any email. So you can use Rasa to personalize not only your newsletter, but the example I gave you of like a conference invite or, educational marketing. Any kind of email can be personalized with that Rasa engine. And there's other ways to use that particular product as a general purpose engine to personalize just about anything. But what I would say is the first thing you should do is do an example of personalization and test it with like a small number of people just to see what the reaction is. If you're trying to calibrate whether or not there's value in personalization. If you already kind of passed that and you're like, yes, I know this is really important and really valuable, then I'd go ahead and run like a full scale, execution of like one piece of it. Um, so the other thing that you can look at is, how do you personalize recommendations of people? So a big part of what we do in associations is we associate. And so when we associate, that means we're connecting with other members of our community. They might be like minded, they might have different interests than us, but how do I connect each person coming to an event with people that are really great fits for them? And the same style of technology can be used at scale to make incredibly good recommendations for people in your community. And that's a totally untapped area. When people are connected by their association, they obviously gain immense value from that. And there's an emotional connection back to the association. He's like, oh, I met these great people at this association. I will always go back to their conference now, right? Because you're part of that community more so than ever. And you feel just immense value. You can't even really put a particular number on that, right? Like you can say, oh, well, that particular session, I learned this much and I got out of it. But when you meet great people, all of us, I think, are wired this way to like just really have a different emotional reaction to that than just learning something.
My husband and I are scheduled to go to an association conference in May of next year in New Orleans. So I'm really excited about that, Amit. I won't, you can probably figure out which association it is. I won't say it by name, but I'm really excited to go kind of undercover and just see how things go there.
Yeah, check it out. Report back.
At Sidecar, we know the power of bringing the brightest, most innovative minds out there together in person to learn and grow. And that's exactly what we do at our annual conference, DigitalNow. DigitalNow is a 2.5-day conference bringing Silicon Valley and executive-level content to the association space. We bring in expert speakers from places like Google, Amazon, and the U.S. Department of State to share insights on emerging technologies and how they're reshaping the future of associations. Whether you come solo or bring your team to collaborate and implement together, you'll leave with a clear vision for what's next. Join us November 2nd through 5th, 2025 at the Lowe's Hotel in Chicago. To secure your spot, visit digitalnow.sidecar.ai.
Want to lead your team into the AI future? Sidecar's AI Learning Hub for Teams equips your association with practical, on-demand AI education. From self-paced courses to live office hours, your whole team gets the skills to use AI without the jargon. Empower your team. Build AI confidence together. Visit sidecar.ai/LH4T to get started.
All right, topic 3. OpenAI just orchestrated the largest AI infrastructure agreements in history, committing over $1 trillion through interconnected deals with AMD, Nvidia, and Oracle. Here's the breakdown. AMD will supply 6 gigawatts of GPUs starting late 2026, with OpenAI potentially taking 10% ownership of AMD through warrants. Nvidia signed to provide 10 gigawatts via a $100 billion investment, and Oracle secured a $300 billion 5-year contract to provide the cloud infrastructure, funded partly by Nvidia's backing. The scale is staggering. 16 gigawatts total is enough to power multiple major cities. And though it might seem like these are independent deals, they're a coordinated strategy. OpenAI is hedging against chip monopoly by splitting between AMD and Nvidia while Oracle provides the data centers. The financial flows are circular. Nvidia invests in OpenAI, which buys Nvidia chips and leases Oracle cloud capacity, which Oracle builds using Nvidia's funding. It's the same companies acting as investors, suppliers, and customers simultaneously. Why we think this matters for associations? Well, these infrastructure investments determine AI's accessibility and pricing for the foreseeable future. The AMD partnership should theoretically break Nvidia's monopoly and lower prices, but the massive demand might keep costs high regardless. The late 2026 deployment timeline means OpenAI is betting billions on capabilities that don't exist yet. They're building for superintelligence, not today's ChatGPT. This isn't just about having more servers, it's about who controls compute that powers all AI advancement. So, Amith, $1 trillion in infrastructure commitments, is that what you see as kind of sustainable growth, or do you think we're watching a bubble in real time?
I think it can be multiple things at once. I guess trillion is the new billion, and it's staggering, how much money we're talking about being invested, but it's also a fraction of the opportunity. So I think you're going to see a lot more than this over time. And if you aggregate the entire industry's commitment to infrastructure build out, and then you add in public sector funds that are being added on top of that in a variety of different parts of the world, the numbers are enormous. And the reason is the prize is so big. The opportunity to get truly intelligent machines out there, which is, an advanced version of what we're dealing with right now, right? What we have right now is quite useful, but it's not what people are shooting for. But you have that at scale. You're talking about a transformative situation for the economy. We have $100+ trillion global GDP right now. A lot of people are saying this could add 10 to 20 percentage points of growth per year if we bring this online, and that may be an underestimate. But no individual economy tends to see that on a sustainable basis, and certainly global GDP has never experienced that rate of growth for a sustained period of time. So it could be transformative in terms of the wealth creation, the productivity output, lots of things. It could also be incredibly problematic in terms of what it does to labor markets, as we've talked about on this pod before. Getting back to the topic at hand, specifically around these parties of OpenAI, Nvidia, AMD, and Oracle, and Microsoft's in the mix as well in different ways, kind of behind the scenes. But what's happening here is you do have money flowing in kind of a circle at times, and it doesn't mean that it's not legitimate. It just means that you have to pay really close attention to the numbers, because if Nvidia invests $100 billion in OpenAI and knows that roughly 50 to 75% of that money is going to come back to it in the form of orders, or maybe an even higher percentage, I don't know how the math works out, is that really an investment, or is that something else, right? What exactly is that? And what does that mean in terms of their margins? They know that some of that's coming back to them. They know what their gross margin is. Now, would they get most of those orders anyway? Perhaps. Would it be as schedulable, as plannable as the way they're doing it? Probably not. And is there competition? There certainly is. Nvidia is by far the leader, just like OpenAI is on the software side. But AMD has some really compelling offerings. They're not sitting still, and they're moving fast. And there's a number of other companies that are out there going after it. The inference game is where the action is going to be. Training models will always be important, but the amount of compute you need for training compared to the amount of compute you need for inference, it's not even going to be a comparison. It's going to be thousands of times the size of the training market, that is the inference market. And so when you think about like inference specific chip architectures like Grok with a Q, Cerebrus, Google's advanced TPU design that they've talked about, there's some interesting stuff happening out there. And I don't think people are paying enough attention to that. So this is definitely an interesting deal. To me, it simply underscores the point that there's a lot of opportunity here. For associations, it means three things. First, it's obviously that AI is something you should pay attention to. Not that people who listen to this podcast haven't been doing that for a bit, but it's a big deal. Number two, it's going to get cheaper, because all of this spending means that as supply increases, the demand is increasing at this torrid pace, which is why people are investing so much to fulfill that demand. But as competition heats up and more and more and more players are providing inference services, it's going to drop the cost. The other thing that I think is not being paid attention to is the speed at which models are getting smaller, faster, and therefore cheaper to run. So if you think about the progression, we have talked about a lot on this podcast how today's small models or so-called small models are about as intelligent as this time last year's frontier models, right? So, and it's probably actually, that's a conservative statement. It's probably more like 6 to 9 months behind in terms of, small to mid-sized open source models relative to the best of breed open, frontier proprietary models. So if you, for example, compare GPT-5 Pro right now to, let's say, the best open source models, what's the gap? I think the best open source models right now are somewhere in the GPT-4o era, maybe a little bit better than that in some areas. But in fairness, they are a fair bit better than GPT-4o. But the point is that GPT-4o was absolutely state of the art 12 months ago. So we are less than 12 months behind with models that you can run on your computer. What that means is that for a lot of workloads, which many of the things associations need to do not require GPT-5 Pro or GPT-7 Pro or whatever will come, after that. You can get a lot of amazing things done with technology like GPT-OSS-20B, which is a small model from OpenAI, or the Quen series of models from Alibaba that you can inference on fast chips from the providers I've mentioned already in this pod. So there's so much opportunity, but there's so much supply coming into the market. It's going to make inference effectively free.
Mm.
That's the key message to me is like, you do not think about cost because the cost will essentially erode itself down to zero over the course of the coming quarters and years.
Is the circular financial flow that you talked about, Amith, something we have traditionally seen with technology in the past?
Well, if tradition is, kind of all prior bubbles, yes. I mean,
Okay.
most recently with the telecom buildup leading to the dot-com boom and then bust, we had the famous Cisco and Nortel kind of circular dealings that a lot of people have been talking about more recently. I lived through that, so I'm familiar with it. But, it's essentially when suppliers and customers kind of invert the relationship back and forth and the money's flowing back and forth. It's it's the problem with that is it's not problematic. Again, these are not improper deals. These are done in the open. These are public companies. OpenAI is not yet, but probably will be soon. But obviously Nvidia and Oracle are, and so the disclosures are out there of what they're doing. And there's obviously a lot of people looking at this stuff. So it's not that what they're doing at its face value is improper, and it kind of makes sense at a lot of levels. But it's hard to trace the money. It's hard to know how much revenue is really growing when the revenue is an investment, which becomes revenue, which becomes an investment, and then there's multiple parties involved. Another example is the information reported yesterday that Oracle's projected gross margin on this massive cloud deal is around 15%, 15, not 50. 50% would be a pretty nice business, but 15% gross margin. If the top line is big enough, then there's enough dollars flowing to the bottom in theory. But gross margin that's that thin, it's better than a grocery store, but it's certainly not what you'd find to be an attractive, technology-enabled service. So if there's no profit in the future, when you talk about, the compression of these deals, that should yield a very different mindset in terms of, where to invest, for example, and then also what that means in terms of valuations of companies. So I do think that people are going to have at some point a rude awakening from some kind of, bubble collapse, but I don't think that means that the technology is bad. I don't think it means that there's not going to be extraordinary gains to humanity, to everyone who's involved in this at some point, but there will be a lot of people who lose a lot of money. So a lot of investors will lose their shirt. A lot of companies will go out of business. There will be consolidation, but that's somewhat natural. In the whenever there's a remarkable new technology, older technologies end up getting wiped out, and even people who are in the race for the new technology, tend to collide, and eventually the best thing wins, or not always the best, but usually that's what sorts out. You think about like going back to the electrification wars of alternating current versus direct current. We wrote an article about that with AC/DC as the theme, right? And so when alternating current became the big thing, the people who had all this infrastructure for direct current, they had a hard time, let's say. And so that's going to happen with different flavors of AI, different flavors of chips, and it's just moving much, much faster.
Well, everyone Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. We've seen 3 announcements, but really one strategy, and it's that OpenAI is exerting its power over everything from chips to chat to newsletters and everything in between. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you all next week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Sidecar Sync podcast. If you want to dive deeper into anything mentioned in this episode, please check out the links in our show notes. And if you're looking for more in-depth AI education for you, your entire team, or your members, head to sidecar.ai.